why you should not vote, and maybe if you have time to waste amazing day, you can stand in those queues like most black people do every single day and go for your vote. So I think before we start, I think we must first sort of analyze where we come from. And I always say to people that for me this whole concept of voting is like going to a restaurant and the menu is already set there for you, and all you have to do is just choose what you want to eat. And after you leave that, you leave dissatisfied and you're hungry still. But they'll always incentivize you through whatever means, be it through a concept where they say, if you don't vote, you don't complain, or even for some people they give you food passes. But they'll always incentivize you to go back and vote again. And you leave with the same feeling again. But I think before we start, maybe let me try and build this up for everyone, how we got to even vote as most people in this country, and how that hasn't helped us. As maybe all university students know, the ANC, the PAC, and other organizations were unbanned in 1990, and that facilitated a process of negotiation. Now, maybe the education that I received doesn't actually adequately address the question. But for me, negotiation does not necessarily mean me coming from a position of powerlessness and a position where I have no resources and sitting down on the table, across the table, to someone who owns all the levers of power and production in that economy, and factually say that I can negotiate with that person. Now, from that negotiation we had, that negotiation was set about to bring about a constitutional order, which came about 2 years after the first democratic elections in 1996. Now, what happened here was that we came from a position of an economy run by white people, a government, a state of affairs run by white people, and all that radically changed was that black people took the levers of power and nothing necessarily changed after that. The means of production in the economy and the state is still held by white people. Now, maybe from these negotiations, a few things that maybe we're trying to appease black demands came, things like BEE. But the practicalities and the honesty of this country shows us that the majority of people in this country are excluded from those processes of creating wealth. But I think maybe I should give a few stats of the status quo and show why voting would necessarily perpetuate the status quo there are. More than 270 babies and mothers die after birth per day in South Africa due to lack of proper health infrastructure. Unemployment amongst blacks is more than 40% compared to unemployment rate of 5% amongst white people. Blacks own less than 10% of the wealth listed on the JSE, and even of that 10%, all of that is buffered, meaning that it's money that is debt leveraged or it's received from agenda-driven venture capitalists. Only 7% of the land has been returned to blacks. Now this is around about 17 years after democracy, and only 7% of the wealth in this country, or of the land in this country, is held in black hands. Now, I mean, conceptually, we must all understand that you can't build anything that is of economic value, or you can't live off anything that is not built on land. You can't build anything that is of economic value in the sky, and you need land as a primary sort of factor of production. And sadly, the majority of people in this country have no access to that, and that's why we see the emergence of squatter capital in most people, because black people don't necessarily have a claim to the land that they live on. Since 1994, 1 million black farmers have been evicted from SA farms. We have become squatters in our own country. We have an education system that continues to fail the poorest of the poorest, worse than that of relatively poorer SADC countries. During the 2010 FIFA World Cup, government spent more than 120 billion to stage a world-class spectacle at the expense of needed service delivery. Now, this lack of service delivery is couched in nice market fundamentalist terms. They say it's fiscal discipline, they say, it's monetary stability, we can't spend money on this and that, but all of these sort of concepts fly straight out of the window the moment we need to sort of entertain our foreign guests and become the brothel of Europe. Now, finally, the special unit set up by Digital is being investigated for more than 500 years of civilians since its inception 2 years ago. Now, this is a clear example of a police state of living, and I mean, the death of Anders Tatan seeks to validate this. But I mean, all of this is happening while we still, every 4 years and every maybe 2 years in between 4-year terms, we go and stand in queues to vote. And all we are voting for necessarily is just who's going to run and police this white supremacist project that South Africa is. The land is black majority in this country the majority of whom are forced to live in ugly houses that are even worse than the houses that the apartheid government built for black people in this country. And yet, those are the demands that black people want. Now, the biggest problem that I have with voting is that from the onset, even the demands that are brought forward are structurally adjusted by those who give you the demands. So the menu that you want, so if you come in now and you want something different, you're not going to get that because already what your demands from post-1994 have been structurally adjusted to not only be palatable to the world, but also, you know, we always have behind this thing that we don't want to be as around. Now, and it's funny that South Africa has had most of almost 250,000 protests within the space of 1994 and up until now 2011. Yet people still are encouraged to vote. Now, you know, I would also like to show maybe sort of using the two biggest organizations in this country as an example of the similarity that exists between these organizations and all other broader organizations that are part of this sort of political democratic order. You know, the ANC and the DA are the two biggest organizations. If you glean through their manifestos, you'll find that the objectives are the same. We want to create jobs, we want to deliver on services, we want to. But sadly, what we find in this day and age is that we still live in the same sort of country that is governed by the same white value system that we find in this country. So we've normalized that state. And what I'm saying is that even if we put a different organization into power, it's not necessarily going to change the white supremacist project that South Africa is. Because all you're doing is that you are putting someone in power, and that person is protected by a constitutional order that is inherently black and anti-capitalist. And this is stemmed from the Codesto negotiations that preceded the 1994 election. Now, we've accepted and normalized this piecemeal approach that all these political organizations give to us. You know, they always say, we'll give you a house, we'll give you electricity, we'll give you a 4x4 space to live in, you know, to raise your kids in, and to live from that space. Yet, the magnanimity of standstill is all but forgotten when you want those demands. Because those are the demands, but we never want to stretch beyond those demands to say, but why can't we get that? Because this is what they told us that we deserve. I think there's a huge sort of disparity between what we deserve and what they think we deserve and what they want to give to us when they want to give. So I think those are one of the biggest problems. But I think my protest against this sort of political system is that we have set such a low threshold on what we expect from our own politics. We've set such a low threshold that the moment we build someone a toilet that is unenclosed, we complain. But the moment we set out a toilet and I say, Zweli, I'll deliver to you tomorrow an RTB house with one window. And because I promised you that, that's what you want. And I think that's the biggest problem. These animal level demands of food, shelter, employment, and a decent place to shit, honestly, are not what black people deserve. And I think the moment we carry on voting, perpetuating the same system, then we'll find ourselves with the same problem that has come from the ANC government. I think even the concept of equality in their own constitution are only abstract and academic in a sense, because if they say you have equal access to opportunities, then you can't tell me that someone from rural Limpopo who has no money or no access to some of the information that someone from St. John has, that those people have equal access to opportunities. And I think that's a fallacy, and it's part of a project to validate this sort of pro-capitalist white supremacist project that South Africa is. And maybe let me just glean to the manifestos of the ANC now, these local elections, says they're going to provide 4.5 million jobs and expand the failing youth programs and try and expand the sort of the provision of housing. And the RPP sort of kennels that they build for people, they are going to continue to build. And I think what we must assess today, and maybe argue when the floor is open, is whether or not this menu of demands that we get will actually leave us full at the end of the day. And you know, the funny thing is that I was watching an advert where this lady was saying, you know, we're so happy, Nomba and Mitambo Square, only to find today that no, this lady doesn't actually have electricity herself. And this is a municipality run by the DA. She doesn't actually have electricity herself, but some people around her do have electricity. And this is put up on national television to convey a message that these people are delivering on the sort of animal level demands that they think people deserve. So I think when you look at the post-94 movement, you can see it as the abandoning of the promises for exclusion into an existing system that happened even before 1994. So all that these political organizations wanted, they wanted to be the same part of the colonial order that preceded the 94 movement, and to perpetuate that order for the benefit of white capital. So it's clear that we didn't dismantle the social and economic sort of value systems and the structural issues in our economy, yet we are willing to stand in queues to vote. And at the end of the day, it's pathetic really, because it's like putting your money into a pocket with holes in it. We're putting our hopes, we're placing all our hopes on the people on people who don't actually really care about us. Let me just leave you with two quotes from two gentlemen I know very little about, but I found these quotes very interesting. The first one is by Will Rogers. Anything important is never left to the vote of the people. We only get to vote on some man, we never get to vote on what he is to do. Democracy. This is a quote by Benjamin Lichtenberg. Democracy, the state of affairs in which you consent to have your pocket picked and elect the best man to rule. Thank you very much.
Regards to him, I'm just going to call on Zwelenkani Mdlalose now to do his thing, and after that we're going to have an interaction with everybody.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. We have women and robots. Oh, yes, they don't need to vote. Yeah, man. It's true. I agree with the brother and with everything he said. This is what he spoke about is not a matter of opinion. It doesn't be retrospective of Islam. This is the way things are. Status itself, which I think is part of the government, will bring you status to show how poverty has expanded and actually rich and poor has increased. Such things, which is rather strange, considering that, I mean, what happened to the sprinkler looks like even magic. How did that make work? What has happened? But now I think that we cannot reduce the argument to should we vote or not. I think the issue of voting is much more complex than that. It's about the vote, not about voting or not. What is the vote? What can the vote be? What was the vote? What's the vote now? What can it be? So I think it is important that we go into that discourse. Although of course it is equally important to go into the discourse of what the vote has done for people so far. Insofar as moving forward, do we carry the vote along with us, or do we leave it behind? The famous bullets of ballot argument. Some people might argue that bullets for the ballot. So yeah, I would like to put everything into perspective by this very interesting speech. I'm a Dead Press fan, and there's an album that opens with this speech. And the speech goes, I am not a hunter, but I am told that in places like the Arctic, where indigenous people sometimes might hunt a wolf, they'll take a double-edged blade, and they'll put the blood of the blade, and they'll melt it, right, and stick it in the eyes, with the blood, with the blade side up. That's coated with the blood. He continues to say, this it says here, so that only the blade is protruding, and that the wolf will smell the blood and wants to eat. Nothing wrong with wanting to eat. Basically, I'm trying to make the correlation if there's something wrong with wanting to vote. No, obviously, nothing wrong with wanting to eat. But there is something wrong with the blade. There. And I'm paralleling the blade with political parties, with the government, with the state, and the state has dressed itself so comfortably, looks so good with this blood that people need to eat. People need hope. He then continues, it will come and lick the blade, trying to eat. And what happens is when the wolf licks the blade, of course, he cuts his tongue and bleeds, and he thinks he's really having a good thing. Nah. You know, it's hard being on those cues, but there's a sense of hope about voting. We need to vote. He bleeds, and he thinks he's really having a good thing. And he drinks and licks and licks. And of course, he's drinking his own blood and he's killing himself. This is where I create my own edition. That is what politicians have done to the vote. So that's what I'm arguing. I'm arguing when should we vote, why should we vote, how should we vote. And basically, the system that the brother has talked about, that we have currently of voting, is such that the academic political discourse terms it representative democracy. You elect someone to represent you. But what that does is that when you elect someone to represent you, you remove that someone from your situation. They become above your situation insofar as they are tasked with solving your situation. And you are not a part of the solving of the situation, as the quote say. You are only a part of choosing what you think for the person who will solve the situation, which is inherently doesn't make sense. They say power corrupts, power corrupts. I'd like to make a parallel, because later on I'm planning on showing a model of how voting can be used as a tool for people, as an instrument for people to better themselves, and not be used for people to elect people to better themselves. So I'd like to make a parallel. This very interesting character. Strangely enough, high schools and universities, for some strange reason, they don't teach us about that character. And this character is Thomas Sankara. I have no idea what that is. I will tell you about Benjamin Franklin. I will tell you about the Holocaust. But for some reason, I can't tell you about Thomas Sankara. I can't tell you about Lumumba. I can tell you about Madiba. But hey, you know what my situation. So Thomas Sankara comes into power, right? And these are the first policies he places. And I will sort of make a parallel between these policies and the more advanced form of these policies, insofar as the vote is required to advance these policies. Because we don't have the same luxury of having the same sort of leaders as Thomas Sankara was. And unfortunately, we have to breed our own leaders. We have to make our leaders work for us, whereby Thomas Sankara worked for his people. And basically, this is from News Time Africa. It's a newspaper, I think, found it online, and it's a tribute to Thomas Sankara and what he managed to do and what Burkina Faso. He renamed Burkina Faso, which, well, I'm not sure what it was called before, as a French colony. Sorry? Thank you. Upper Volta as a French colony, and he renamed it to Burkina Faso, which means the land of upright men. So he gets into power, and one of the things he does is that he sold off the government fleet of Mercedes-Benz and made the Renault 5. The cheapest car sold in Burkina Faso, the service car for ministers. It's one of the things. He reduced the salaries of all public servants, including his own, and forbade all use of government chauffeurs and first-class airlines. He redistributed land from the feudal landlords and gave it directly to the peasants. Wheat production rose in just 3 years from 1,700 kilograms per hectare to 3,800 kilograms per hectare, making the country's food self-sufficient. He opposed foreign aid, saying that he who feeds you controls you. Sweet sense. Very, very small. He spoke eloquently of forums like Organization of African Unity against continued neo-colonialist penetration of Africa through Western trade and finance. He called for a unit front of African nations to repudiate their foreign debts. He argued that the poor and exploited do not have the obligation to repay money to the rich and the exploiting. Thomas knew how to show his people that they could become dignified and proud through willpower, courage, honesty, and work. What remains above all of my husband is intrigue. This is integrity. I'm sorry. Hey guys, this is George. Hey George, this is his wife. I don't know. For education. That's what I'm arguing for. You must give me better education. That's what I'm saying. It's self-evident. I'm about to finish on that. There's a few more that I found really interesting. He forced civil servants to pay 1 month's salary to public projects. He refused to use air conditioning in his office on the grounds that such luxury was not available to anyone but a handful. It goes back to what I was saying. You see, somehow when we elect people to represent us, they sort of float away. They float away to a higher hemisphere. You know what I mean? And they become these gods that are supposed to manipulate your conditions and make them better. But all they're doing is lying. So where does the vote come in? I haven't talked about Thomas Sankara's relation to the vote. I'm going to talk about these policies, the values of these policies in relation to the vote, to what's proposed by SNI, September National News. And September National News, if I can give a brief description as it describes itself, says, we as the ordinary citizens of this country are concerned that after 16 years, or 17 years now, it was formed last year, it's 17 years. So are concerned that after 17 years of democracy, there is no end to the suffering of the majority. We now hereby call a national dialogue to discuss our situation and collectively find answers. This call is for September National News. So basically, just start talking. It's not. Something's wrong. We have to accept that something is wrong before we try to change it. So it's offering a very practical, simple solution that can be compared to what Thomas Sankara tried to achieve. It's called the People's Manifesto, and let me read it. It says, we promise the politicians nothing, and we demand they deliver everything. All the political parties have now published their manifestos, the empty rituals they buy our votes with. We say 17 years of elections without change are enough. Now we make our own manifesto. Of course, this is not enforcing a certain ideal. This thing can only be passed through popular will. It's not just a few people sitting, armchair revolutionaries of one of the marks, sitting and making what people need. It's going to be given to people, and here it's going to be asked, does this make sense to you? Do you think it's going to better you? And if people say no, then they must go vote for the ANC, whatever the case may be, for the DA. If they say yes, then we move on. We, the people of South Africa, hereby legislate a new law titled Politicians and Public Servants Use Public Services. This law compels all politicians, from the president to the local councillor, and all public servants, from the director general to the sweeper, to their families, to use public utilities, starting with the following: public hospitals, public schools, transport, and state-provided housing. So, Uzuma, what's in Misabana? You must go live there. Minister of Health, maybe sick. When I have one, now Uzuma everywhere. Our politicians and public servants have neglected public services for far too long because they know they can take their families to the private sector. We say, what's good for you is good for us. Quality for all, for you. Let's be honest about it. If you say we're equal, let us be equal. Let us be treated the same way. Let's live in the same conditions. Our hospitals are falling apart. Doctors, nurses are overworked and underpaid. By and large, our public hospitals are places of death. Yeah. Spending as long as we more shy. Simply put, no one is safe in public hospitals. Our leaders, politicians, senior public servants, and their families use private hospitals, and that is why they don't care about private hospitals, which are used by the poor. Our public schools are in bad condition. Teachers are underpaid, and the government is not investing in their training. With the result that after 12 years of schooling, most children from public schools can't read,
can't write or even count. This leads to a high unemployment rate amongst the youth who are trapped and hopeless. There seems to be a correlation though, because although South Africa has such poor education, South Africa is the fastest growing economy in Africa. What does it mean? It means that there seems to be an incentive to invest with uneducated people, because uneducated people are easily exploited. So, basically speaking, the government has sold us. It has sold us. We are literally slaves who can fend for themselves. To begin, our public transport system is appalling. Every morning and night, our people are packed into taxis, buses, and trains like sardines. These queues are long and the fares are high. Our leaders, the rich and senior civil servants, have big subsidies to get private transport. I don't know if you remember what Thomas and Sankara did with the method of private transport for government officials. So these people have big cars. Some of our ministers can buy cars worth millions of taxpayers' money. The townships are generally bad service. The houses are small, and millions are forced to live in shacks. The RDP houses built by our black government are worse than the matchbox houses built during apartheid. Our leaders live in mansions, while the people are forced to live in rat-infested townships. We hereby commit ourselves to realize the legislation to hold public representatives and servants accountable to the people. This is very important. Together, let's make this law a reality. This campaign is undertaken in the memory of Andis Kataya, who was killed by our government for demanding quality services for all. It's a really, really sad story. Ubrada, Kuzela, Umtonta, which is Muslim Umtonta. What's happening now is that the vote is structured in such a way that people are accountable to politicians. So every 5 years, the politicians are going to come through, campaign visits, and ask for the vote and leave. It means that there's this reservoir. So townships or other poor black people are reservoirs in two ways. The reservoirs for labor, for white capital, or other capital of any kind, which is go back and forth. That's what we labor. The reservoirs for voting, for votes. So politicians go there when they need votes. To maintain that divide, again, I make a reference to this very intellectual source called their press. The police only become necessary in human society, only in the junction in human society, where it's a fight between those who have and those who don't. And that's the state. That's the state. Now, what I'm suggesting is that the vote be not done away with. I'm suggesting that the vote be used in such a way that we're moving from a democracy of representation to a democracy of participation. And we have a technology to do this. It was a very interesting idea, which I'm going to get on to later on. But I mean, when I say participation, I mean that everything that has to do with my surroundings, every decision with my surroundings, if Enlogo wants to invest in my surroundings, I'm sorry, SMS. Sure, which is going to pay. Figure out Enlogo, but tell her what he no, Pakistan now. Because Pakistan and I'm let's say I'm sending SMS back is Ayabonga today. Oh yeah, sure, okay. You vote that's a vote. You vote every day. Who thinks we should do this, who thinks we should do this. So there seems to be something important within human society about voting. But you know what they say, guns don't kill people, people kill people. We can't say the same thing about voting. Voting is not the best thing for people. But we have to find a way to use voting in a way that it pays off for people. Yeah, basically that was the idea, which is we are so advanced in our technology that everyone has a phone. So why does everyone have to stand in line? Long, long line. Yeah, I think I've said it. Yeah, thank you.